In 2018, Suella became Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department for Exiting the European Union, but resigned from that office on the day that Theresa May produced her draft Brexit withdrawal agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Member of Parliament for Fareham, Suella Braverman.
Barry, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Thank you for this welcome. And thank you, Robert and the Bruges Group, for all you are doing to campaign for honesty and integrity and deliverance in politics. We need it now more than ever. And thank you for your support. We are engaged in many battles right now. As conservatives, we are engaged in a battle against a cultural Marxism, where banning things is becoming de rigueur, where freedom of speech is becoming a taboo, where our universities, quintessential institutions of liberalism, are being shrouded in censorship and a culture of no platforming. We're engaged in a battle against socialism. Reheated, old-style, unoriginal 1980s socialism, tried and tested and failed the British people, which says that the state knows best, that says that taxpayers' money thrown at our public services will be the panacea to our challenges, that is the enemy of enterprise, innovation and risk-taking, and that doesn't represent the pride and the patriotism of our country, but would diminish our place on the world stage. And we have, right now, a battle for a good and proper Brexit. We are right in the midst of this battle. And that battle has been waging for many years, and I know many of you here have probably been fighting that battle maybe since before I was even born. But it is a battle of great intensity. And right now, we are at this moment at a crossroads in many ways. We find ourselves in a constitutional crisis, unforeseen to some extent. But when we look back with retrospect, we can see all the errors and all the missteps that have led us to this crisis that we find ourselves in now. And the question that I'm grappling with, and I think will be tested to extreme in the next 10 days, 14 days, is that of trust. And can our citizens, can you, the people, voters, can you trust your politicians? In fact, frankly, do we deserve that trust? And at the moment, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. For I feel there has been a breakdown in trust. Barry put it very powerfully. Simple promises, enshrined in law, no less, of leaving the European Union on the 29th of March. Broken. A broken promise, lying in the wake of what has been a failed negotiation. Leaving the customs union and leaving the single market. Promises pledged, chirped by every Conservative MP during the 2017 general election in manifestos upon which we all got elected. Abandoned, evaporated, following the publication of the draft withdrawal treaty, which locks us into a customs union indefinitely. Not my words, but the assessment of the Attorney General, who opined on the legal risk of the terms of the Northern Irish backstop, which would trap the UK indefinitely in a customs union and much for single market regulations, and whilst annexing part of our nation, Northern Ireland. That promise, that no deal, is better than a bad deal. Remember that one? Disappeared. And we see now a government which just doesn't show the political will to lead us to that ultimate and necessary destination now. For I believe that is exactly the solution to this crisis right now. Go back to that Lancaster House speech, Prime Minister. Go back to those words that you proclaimed to the British people, that in the event that a deal was not successful, we would be prepared to make a successful Brexit on WTO rules. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the way to solve this crisis. I tell you, the Prime Minister, for all her woes right now, and I don't envy her position, it must be very, very hard, to say the least, for her to get up every day and continue in post. But she could turn it all around right now. She could unite the country, because the polls are showing very clearly the British people, even businesses, are now ready and prepared for a no-deal scenario, because it ceases and brings an end to this pernicious uncertainty of will we, won't we. The Conservative Party, our members, the vast majority of whom favour a WTO Brexit, would rally behind the Prime Minister and hail this a victory. And she would be known forevermore in those history books as another great Prime Minister has been known, as someone who delivered on her promises and took us out cleanly of the European Union. And she would go down as someone within the Conservative Parliamentary Party. She would bring behind her 90% of Conservative MPs. And yes, there would be some Conservative MPs and many other MPs in our House of Commons who've never accepted the result of the referendum, who've never reconciled themselves to the instruction from the British people, who've always maintained that they know better, that their view matters more than 17.4 million people who turned out to vote in an historic democratic exercise. Yes, they would still disagree with her, but she would be able to assert her position by virtue of her office to say you're either with me or you're against me, and I'm going to lead this country through to succeed, overcoming the obstacles, and yes, there will be obstacles to a WTO Brexit, overcoming those obstacles and ultimately thriving with economic freedom, legal freedom, parliamentary sovereignty, control over migration, freedom to strike trade deals, set our own tariffs, set our own regulations, be open and pivot towards the global and growing economy. All those huge opportunities that we are on the verge of squandering, she could relieve and reclaim from the jaws of defeat right now. And that is the way through this. And all it takes is her political will and her political leadership. For she has the law and the statutory authority to do so. Motions and MPs and debates in Parliament make for high drama and headlines. But ultimately, none of these debates are binding on the hands of the Prime Minister. Ultimately, even yesterday, at possibly what has been the worst moment of my time in Parliament, when backbenchers who have been obstructive and against this referendum result for many years, ultimately finally seized control from the government, upending our constitutional arrangement. Even yesterday, when that vote was passed, and even as we go into tomorrow with indicative votes, which are non-binding on her, she could still retrieve this situation. And there is a glimmer of hope that she may well do that, although I have to be honest with you, it's only a glimmer these days. We know that the EU have finalised their no-deal preparations. They made that announcement yesterday. We've heard from the Irish that they've made it plain that in a no-deal scenario, no extra infrastructure or checks will be put up between Northern Ireland and the Republic. So much for this huge fear that we'll be returning to the days of the Troubles if we have a no-deal scenario. So much for those fears and speculation that we'll be tearing up the Good Friday Agreement. No, the Irish, the EU and the British are committed to ensuring seamless flows across that border, even in a WTO Brexit. So that's where we are. We are in this crisis right now. I believe there is a clear way out. And I'll be honest with you, there is huge pressure in Parliament and throughout the country. Many MPs are grappling with a Hobson's choice. A Hobson's choice into which we've been bullied. A choice that says on the one hand, you can have this deal, which isn't really Brexit, or face a long extension, which isn't really Brexit. And when you're faced with that choice, I feel, well, what do I do? Do I cave? Do I cave on those promises? Do I cave on the promises of leaving the customs union, which this deal will not do? Do I cave on the promises of being able to strike our free trade agreements, which this deal will not do? In 18 months' time, when we're disabled from striking that FTA with the US, what do I say to you if you invite me back, if I vote for the deal? What do I say to you? And you'll say to me, well, you voted for that deal, Suella, and that's the cause of our inability to develop our independent trade policy. What will I say to you when you ask me in 2 years' time why the European Court of Justice still prevails over our domestic courts? Why EU regulations still apply automatically in the UK without us having any say whatsoever, even worse than our current position? What will you say when free movement is still continuing, not in 2 years' time, but maybe in 3 years' time or even 4 years' time? For the terms of this treaty don't even bring free movement to an end. Read the pages of the treaty and you will find nowhere in the legal text does the Free Movement Directive come to an end. So that's for the implementation period. It's likely that that implementation period might be extended to the end of 2022, when the Free Movement Directive continues. So that's over 6 years from the date of the referendum, and we're still accepting free movement rights. And all we have for ending free movement are 5 words in the non-binding political declaration, that whilst it's noted that the UK will bring free movement to an end, we will then set up a labour mobility framework. Non-binding and scant detail. I'm not convinced. So on the customs union and trade, on single market and regulations, on judicial, parliamentary and legal sovereignty, and on free movement, and not to forget the money that we continue to be paying under this agreement. Front-loaded, I grant you that, but we will be paying for many, many years under this agreement. You will ask me, Suella, well, I thought you said this deal was Brexit in March 2019. And I won't be able to look you in the eye. I won't be able to look you in the eye and speak honestly if I vote for this deal. And that's why, as of today, I am still resolved, difficult though it may be, and unpopular as it may sound in the press, and as hardline and extremist as I'm being portrayed. I've been called a lot of things. I'm getting used to them. I've been called jihadi. I've been called an extremist. I've been called a xenophobe. I've been called ignorant. I've been called a racist. You know, I'm used to it now. I've got an internal competition for the worst insult that I can get. I can take all of that. I can take all of that. For this job is a privilege. This job is a privilege. It is not a right. And every day that I go to work in that place and serve my constituents and serve the British people, I remind myself of the simple promises that I've made and the simple act that I need to do in order to honour those promises. And for me, that is more important than insults, than career progression, than even political optics, as they like to call it. For me, trust and promises are vital to keep faith in the British people now more than ever. And so, as of today, and it may not even resume as an issue, I will be voting against this deal. But my vote is not one of 600 odd. And I need to level with you that that will not in itself lead to the outcome that we all want. I will stick to my principles as far as I'm tested, as far as I'm stretched, and I will withstand all I can. What happens beyond that, I will do all in my might to stop. I will stop an extension. I will vote against any form of extension. I will vote against any form of customs union. I will vote against any form of Norway plus common market to revocation, cancellation. But I cannot guarantee that the outcome will reflect my vote. And all I can reconcile myself to then in those circumstances is that those outcomes, unacceptable though they may be, will be out of my hands, and I will have nothing to do with them. And I will be able to come back to you next year and say, we are in this situation. Perhaps we may have failed to deliver Brexit this time. But I tell you, the British people will not have failed us, I hope. The British people will still want independence and sovereignty. I believe that dream is alive and well in the hearts of our people, more so than it was in 2016. And I believe if we have to keep fighting, so we must do. Thank you.